JRPGs have always been a genre that I love to absorb myself in. Like many, my introduction into this genre was with the Final Fantasy series. I came across Final Fantasy VIII through a PS1 demo disc. As a kid with no experience with the genre, I was engrossed by the story and the battle system. This led to me trying other entries in the series and cementing myself as a fan of it. As new console generations came, I found myself trying other series like the Tales of games, Shining Force, and Fire Emblem. Also, as I started covering JRPGs on my channel, I received many requests to cover the Legend of Heroes series. I had never heard of it, and after playing one entry, I understood why their fans wanted me to try it. My point with all of this is while I love Final Fantasy and it does have that big recognized name behind it, there are plenty of other JRPGs that deserve our attention. Felseal is one of 2019's best games, and it was heavily inspired by the Tactics series. It was scratching that strategy itch, but I found myself looking to try out other RPG strategy games. This year, Langrisser is getting a combination release with the first two games getting bundled together. I came across this at PAX East and it caught my eye right away. After spending some time with the first game's demo, I wanted to try out the full game. I began to look up the series, and to my surprise, this new bundle is a remaster of the first two games of this beloved series. From what I gathered, the series has not really moved out of Japan except for a few titles. With knowing very little about the game, I went into this title mostly blind, and I had a great time with it. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you my review for Langrisser 1. Langrisser is a strategy RPG that focuses on troop management, surveying your environment, and assessing your enemy's strengths and weaknesses. At a quick glance, you will think that this game operates just like Fire Emblem and Shining Force, but it does have both similarities and unique things going on for its combat system. When you start a level, you will have your commanders on the field. At the start of the levels, you can usually change up their position if you want. After the commanders are in position, you will have the option to use your money to recruit mercenaries for each of your commanders. Now, depending on the commander's class and what classes you have unlocked, they will have different mercenaries that they can recruit along with how many they can have. For example, some commanders can recruit mercenaries that will fly along with some that are on horseback. Now, while you are in the fights, your focus will be on your commanders. You can choose to individually control the mercenaries, or they will stick close to your commander, or you can give them basic commands. The trick with the mercenaries is if your commander dies, then all of the mercenaries will die as well, and this is the same for the enemy commanders. This results in you trying to find the most efficient way to target the commander and eliminate his large force. Mercenaries that attack on behalf of their commander will earn experience points for them, so the mercenaries will not level up or carry over from level to level, but they feed into the commander's experience point bar and can be recruited again at the start of each battle. The mercenaries aspect of the game helps to give the combat some nice scale to the fights. There's a lot of different classes for your mercenaries and your commanders. You will have magic users who can provide you with healing, buffs, and can hit many enemies in a set area. You have your foot soldiers, archers, flying units, and more. Different classes of units do better against certain classes. For example, spearmen are better when fighting against horseback enemies. You can overcome these through brute force with your commanders, but if you pay attention to the different classes, you will be able to fight more effectively. The levels try to change up the objectives that you need to complete. In most situations, your main objective will be to take out all the enemies or the top commander. But you will also have other levels where you need to prevent other AI-controlled allies from dying, or you will need to quickly get to a spot on the map to be able to defend a certain ally. And there are also situations where enemies will try to flee and you need to take them out before they escape. These small touches in the variations of the combat encounters do a good job of keeping it fresh. One thing that does make it predictable is how after a few rounds, the enemies usually get reinforcements coming in from a spot on the map to try and mess with your strategy. I like the idea of this happening as it helps to throw an unknown event that you need to deal with on the fly, but it got predictable as this happened quite often and these events lost their impact that they would have had if they happened less often. While you are in battles attacking enemies and defeating them, you will gain experience points. As you level up, you will gain levels and your stats will increase. Along with this, you will also earn points that you can use to unlock new specializations for your characters. As you unlock new branches in these trees, you will get a nice bump in your stats, along with unlocking new moves to use and passive improvements. The classes help to change up how you want to approach your combat encounters. I changed my class from my main character and it meant that he got a large boost in his attack power, but he could only recruit one mercenary in the fights. There's some give and take with the classes, but this also gives the player some choice in how they want their characters to play, and then this plays into the options you have in battle. Other character progression is tied with buying new pieces of equipment in between battles. Another thing to note is that each of the battles will have these shiny areas on the map, and if you can get a soldier over to these points, you'll be able to pick up a useful item, and it's usually a good piece of equipment. Initially, I was a bit disappointed with how little story was presented within the first few chapters. The game eventually grows from my initial impressions, and I'm glad they got better. The story starts out with you as a prince who finds himself under attack at his castle. The story plays out how you would expect, with the prince fighting his enemies and then working to retake his home again. You will meet new characters who act as new party members for your group. But the game really does not put a lot of focus on the story or even the characters for many of its chapters. Each of the chapters gives you some setup on the encounter, but outside of this, the game doesn't really take any time to really let the plot breathe. So the beginning hours does feel like you are really briskly being thrown from battle to battle. This would have been more of an issue if the gameplay wasn't good, or potentially if this was a film, but I sort of felt in the middle with this approach. On the one hand, I would have liked to have learned more about my characters and potentially grow attached to them, and on the other, I really appreciated how the game got to the point with its plot and knew that its strength relied in its gameplay. And as such, the game does not waste the player's time in making you go through long conversations. So for the first few chapters, I felt like the plot was on the lighter side for a JRPG, but I also appreciated how this was all in service of getting the player to more gameplay sections and not interrupting the pacing of the battles. Things got more interesting later on. You will hit certain points within the story where the main story got to go in a different direction. This can cause the events to change depending on meeting certain conditions within that set level, and this would result in having certain characters die or not killing certain characters, and this will open up variations in the story where you might have someone that you originally did not have on your first run, but now you have a new character there. While the story and characters lack depth, I did like what was presented, and this aspect of having your story alter was pretty engaging. Also, at any point in the game, you can choose to go back to older missions and make new choices if you want to see a different path, along with having a New Game Plus option. The soundtrack is pretty awesome in this game, and here are a few tracks from the game. Langrisser turned out to be a pleasant surprise. I never heard of the series, and I'm glad that they made a remaster for the first two games to give this game some nice exposure. The game is extremely addictive, and I loved leveling up my characters and unlocking new classes. The game doesn't waste the player's time and focuses on keeping them in different combat encounters. I did enjoy how the story can deviate depending on what happened during certain missions. The replay value is high and it's very enjoyable. I look forward to playing the sequel, and I highly recommend you check this one out.